How much for the papaya and the eggs? 30,000 for everything. Thank you.
I honestly think this is the best idea we've had all week. We should do it tomorrow.
Absolutely, I agree completely. Let's make it happen.
This might sting a little, just try to keep it still.
Ow. Okay, I'll try.
The data clearly shows we need to change our strategy here. We can't ignore these numbers any longer.
I agree completely. We have to adapt.
The morning sun filtered softly through the thin bamboo curtains, painting faint golden lines across the small wooden table where Diep sat peeling papayas. Her hands were steady, but her heart was not. Every slice seemed to echo a thought she was trying to silence. Outside, the sound of birds and the faint crash of distant waves filled the air, a peaceful rhythm that felt so unlike the storm inside her. Diep had always told herself she didn't need love. Love, she thought, was for people who had time to dream, not for women like her who built their days out of sweat, silence, and survival. Yet lately, the image of James kept breaking through that wall she had built around herself. His laugh, his kindness, the way he looked at her as if she wasn't broken, as if she still deserved to be seen. She sighed, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "You're a fool," she murmured to herself. "He's from another world." Still, she couldn't help thinking of the way his eyes softened whenever he spoke to her, how he always found an excuse to stop by, fixing her shelves, helping her carry baskets from the market, or just sitting quietly while she cooked. It wasn't pity. She knew pity when she saw it. No, it was something deeper, more dangerous, something that scared her more than loneliness ever did. That afternoon, she went to the small market by the riverbank, her basket filled with papayas she had grown herself. The air was thick with the smell of grilled corn and salt water. Children laughed, running barefoot through puddles from the morning rain. "Papayas! Fresh papayas!" she called softly, her voice almost shy among the louder vendors. A middle-aged woman approached, her eyes kind but curious. "Are you the woman who used to live near the old fishing dock?" Diep nodded. "Yes." "That was a long time ago." The woman smiled, selecting 2 ripe fruits. "I heard you divorced your husband. You live alone now?" Diep hesitated, then nodded again. "Yes, but I'm fine. I have my garden, my work." The woman paid and said gently, "A strong woman like you deserves happiness. Don't let the past chain your heart." Diep smiled faintly but said nothing. Her heart wasn't chained to the past. It was caught between what she feared and what she wanted. Not long after, a man stopped by her stall. He was tall, with a calm, polite smile. He picked up one of the papayas and said, "These look good. You grew them yourself?" "Yes," Diep replied, surprised. He nodded appreciatively. "Then I'll take 4. It's rare to find fruit grown with such care." His voice was gentle, his words sincere. Diep felt an unexpected warmth bloom in her chest. the simple joy of being seen, even by a stranger. "Thank you," she said, her smile genuine this time. When he left, she stood for a moment, watching the crowd, the wind tugging softly at her hair. For the first time that day, she felt lighter. That evening, after selling her last papaya, she walked home with tired feet but a quiet mind. The sky was painted in orange and rose, the air cool and sweet. Her small house waited at the edge of the fields, surrounded by the scent of jasmine. As she entered, she noticed a small basket left by the door. Inside, with a loaf of bread, a note, and a single white flower. The handwriting was familiar. "For the hardest worker I know, don't forget to eat." She didn't need to check the signature. It was James. Diep's heart trembled. She sat on the steps, holding the note between her fingers, reading it again and again. His gestures were always so simple, yet they carried a tenderness she didn't know how to receive. The next morning, the sound of an approaching motorcycle startled her. James was back. He parked by the fence, removing his helmet, smiling in that calm, steady way that always seemed to disarm her. "Good morning," he said. "You didn't forget to eat, did you?" Diep shook her head, trying to hide her smile. "You didn't have to bring that bread." "I wanted to," he said. "Besides, it gave me an excuse to see how your garden's doing." He followed her into the small patch of green behind her house. Rows of papaya trees, a few herbs, some climbing vegetables. He crouched down to examine the soil, his fingers brushing the leaves. "You've done all this by yourself?" "Yes," she replied softly. "It's not much, but it's mine." James looked up at her. "It's beautiful. You're building something real here, Diep. Something that grows." His words hit deeper than he probably realized. She turned away, pretending to adjust a basket. "It's just a garden," she said quickly. "It's more than that," he said quietly. The silence stretched between them, warm and fragile. Then James straightened up and said, "There's a new seaweed farm opening nearby. I'm helping manage it. You should come by. Maybe you could sell your papayas there. The workers love fresh fruit." She hesitated. "I don't know. Please," he said gently. "Think about it. You deserve more than just getting by." That night, she did think about it, longer than she meant to. But thinking about the offer also meant thinking about him, and that was something she couldn't afford. 2 days later, as she was cleaning the small kitchen, she heard a familiar voice calling from outside. It was Lynn, her old friend from years ago. "Diep, it's really you!" Lynn laughed as she stepped through the gate, her clothes damp from the morning mist. Diep's eyes widened in joy. "Lynn, I thought you'd moved to the city." "I did," Lynn said, hugging her, "but the city moved on without me, so I came back. I'm staying at a friend's farm for a while. He's, well, a businessman, too rich for his own good." Diep smiled knowingly. "And you?" Lynn sighed, sitting down. "Divorced. Again." They both laughed, though there was sadness behind it. Over tea, they talked for hours about love, mistakes, and the quiet ache of starting over. When Diep mentioned James, Lynn's eyes softened. "You like him," she said simply. Diep froze. "It doesn't matter." "Of course it does," Lynn said. "If you feel it, it matters." Diep shook her head. "I can't. He's everything I'm not. Educated, successful, respected. If I let myself love him, I'll only embarrass him." Lynn reached across the table and took her hand. "You know what's worse than being embarrassed? Being alone because you were too afraid to be happy." Diep didn't answer. She stared down at her tea, watching the steam fade into the air. The next morning, Lynn returned to her friend's farm, leaving behind a piece of advice that lingered in Diep's mind. The world will always talk. Let it. Just make sure it never decides for you. Meanwhile, far across the coast, James was standing in a large warehouse near the seaweed fields. The air smelled of salt and metal. He was meeting with Ben, the farm's owner, a sharp, honest man with weathered hands and a kind smile. "So," Ben said, gesturing toward the drying racks, "you want to buy seaweed from us? That's a big deal. You sure about the price?" James nodded. $22,000 for the first batch. If it meets export quality, we'll order more. Ben whistled softly. You really like this country, don't you? James smiled. I do. It's more than business. It's peaceful here. People still believe in hard work and kindness. Ben grinned. And maybe a woman? James's smile faltered for a moment, but he didn't deny it. Maybe. They shook hands, sealing the deal. But as James drove back toward town, the sun setting behind him, his thoughts were elsewhere. Not on the contract, not on the money, but on a woman with kind eyes and hands that smelled faintly of papaya leaves. Back in her small house, Diep sat by the lamp, sewing a torn sleeve. The radio played softly, a love song from another time. She tried not to listen, but the words lingered, wrapping around her like a whisper she couldn't escape. Her thoughts drifted again to James, his patience, his quiet laughter, the way he looked at her like she wasn't invisible. But then she remembered the way people stared when they walked through the market together, the whispers, the pity, the envy. It all came back like cold rain. No, she said aloud, setting the needle down. I can't do this to him. Still, even as she tried to convince herself, she knew the truth. She was already in too deep. The next morning came with the smell of rain and the low hum of the sea. Diep woke before sunrise, as she always did, but something felt different. The house was too still, too quiet. She sat by the window, watching the faint mist drift across the fields. Somewhere far away, a rooster crowed, and the sound echoed like a memory she couldn't quite place. She tried to distract herself with chores. She boiled rice, swept the floor, and fed the chickens, but no matter what she did, her mind circled back to James. The sound of his laughter, the warmth in his eyes when he spoke her name, it all felt too close, like he had left a piece of himself behind. By mid-morning, Lynn stopped by again. She brought oranges and the same bright energy that Diep had always admired. You've lost weight, Lynn said, studying her face. What's going on in that head of yours? Diep smiled faintly. Just thinking. About him? Diep looked away. He's probably busy. He's got his company, his life. I'm just a small part of a story he'll forget soon. Lynn shook her head. You're not a footnote, Diep. You're the page he keeps rereading. Diep laughed softly, though her eyes glistened. You sound like you're writing poetry again. Lynn grinned. Maybe I am. Or maybe I just know what it looks like when a woman's afraid to love. They talked for a while about small things, the harvest, the market, the upcoming festival. But Diep could feel the weight of her friend's gaze, as if Lynn could see the storm brewing behind her calm expression. When Lynn finally left, the house felt empty again. Diep returned to her garden, the soil damp beneath her bare feet. She bent down to water the plants, whispering softly to them like old friends. The wind carried the scent of the sea, and for a moment she thought she heard James's voice in it. Warm, steady, patient. That night, as she was preparing dinner, the sound of a motorbike cut through the silence. Her heart skipped a beat. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped outside. James was there, standing by the gate, his hair tousled from the ride. He was holding a small wooden crate filled with papayas. You've been selling so many of these, he said with a smile. I thought I'd bring some back for you. Fair trade, right? Diep froze for a moment, torn between joy and fear. You shouldn't have come, she said quietly. James tilted his head. I thought we agreed that I'm terrible at listening. She sighed, but the corner of her mouth lifted slightly. You really are. He followed her inside, placing the crate on the table. The room smelled of wood and herbs, the scent he had come to associate with her. Humble, warm, alive. They sat together, sharing the simple meal she had prepared: rice, soup, and pickled vegetables. Between them, the silence was not awkward, but full, like a space where words didn't need to live. After dinner, James leaned back in his chair, looking at her with that quiet intensity she had come to fear and crave. I visited the seaweed farms today, he said. We're expanding. It's going to be big. Exports to Europe, new jobs for the locals. I thought maybe... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Maybe you could help manage part of it. You're good with people, Diep. You understand them. She shook her head immediately. I can't. I don't belong in your business world. I wouldn't fit in. He frowned. You're not giving yourself enough credit. And you're giving me too much, she said, her tone soft but firm. You think I'm stronger than I am. But I'm just someone trying to survive. James leaned forward, his voice gentle but unyielding. You're more than that, Diep. You're someone who makes survival look like grace. Her heart twisted painfully. Don't say things like that. Why? Because it makes me hope. And I don't want to hope for something that will only hurt later. He looked at her for a long moment, his jaw tightening. You think love is pain waiting to happen. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence said it all. He stood, taking a slow breath. Then let me change that. Her eyes widened, and before she could stop him, he stepped closer. Diep, he said softly, I love you. The words hung in the air, heavy and fragile. Diep's breath caught. For a moment, she could only stare at him, her heart pounding so loud she thought he could hear it. Don't, she whispered, please. I have to, he said. Because if I don't say it, I'll regret it forever. Tears welled in her eyes. You don't understand. People will talk. They'll say I trapped you, that I used you. I can't give you the kind of life you deserve. He shook his head, his voice trembling. What I deserve is to be happy, and I'm happiest when I'm with you. She took a step back, shaking her head furiously. No, James, you're confused. You pity me. His eyes darkened. Is that what you think this is? It's what it has to be, she said, her voice breaking, because anything else would be too cruel. The silence between them cracked like glass. For a long moment, neither moved. Then slowly, James stepped back. If you really believe that, then I'll leave, he said quietly. But know this, you're the only person I've ever said those words to and meant them. He turned toward the door. James, he stopped but didn't turn. She tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Her throat ached. Her heart screamed what her lips could not. Stay. But she said nothing. James left. The sound of his motorbike faded into the distance, swallowed by the night. Diep stood there, her body trembling, her eyes wet. The room felt suddenly colder, emptier, like something precious had just been taken from it. She sat by the window until the candle burned out, staring at the road where he had disappeared. The stars outside were dim, hidden behind thin clouds. The next day she went to the market as usual. The world moved on. Vendors shouted, children laughed, boats drifted lazily along the river. Yet everything felt muted, distant. Even when people spoke to her, she barely heard them. As she was packing up her papayas, a familiar voice called out, Diep! It was one of James's business partners, a kind man with sharp eyes and an honest smile. I've been looking for you, he said, catching his breath. Diep frowned. Why? He hesitated. James, he's been different lately, quiet, distracted. He told me about you. Her heart froze. He shouldn't have. The man smiled gently. He didn't say much, just that you're the reason he believes people can still be good. She looked down, her voice barely a whisper. He shouldn't believe that. He should, the man said. Because it's true. He cares about you more than you know. And if you care about him too, don't let fear be the thing that decides your life. Before she could respond, he pressed a small envelope into her hand. He left this at the seaweed farm, said it was for you if he couldn't say goodbye properly. When he walked away, Diep stood frozen, the envelope trembling in her hand. She opened it slowly. Inside was a short note written in James's familiar handwriting. If love frightens you, let it, but don't run from it, because sometimes the only way to be brave is to love anyway. Her vision blurred with tears. She pressed the note to her chest, whispering to herself, maybe one day. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the sea, Diep stood on her porch, the breeze tugging at her hair. She looked out at the horizon, endless, beautiful, uncertain. For the first time in a long while, she smiled. Not because she had the answers, but because she finally understood the question. The following week arrived like a slow ache. The sea was calm, yet something restless moved beneath its surface, just like the storm within Diep. Every morning she woke before dawn, lit the small oil lamp, and went to the garden. The papayas were ripening faster now, glowing orange beneath the pale light. She picked them gently, her fingers brushing the cool skin, and thought about the warmth of James's hand when he had passed her a basket not long ago. That memory stayed with her like the scent of salt on the air, familiar, haunting, impossible to wash away. Her neighbors noticed she had grown quieter. At the market, when someone mentioned James's name, Diep would only nod, pretending not to hear. But every night, when the world turned still, she took out the note he had left her and read it again. If love frightens you, let it, but don't run from it. Each word cut through her fear like a whisper from somewhere deep inside her soul. One afternoon, Lynn returned, her face glowing with the warmth of the sun. She carried a small bag of tea leaves and an envelope. "This came to the farm," she said softly. "It's for you." Diep took the envelope with trembling hands. It was thick, the paper heavy, the handwriting unmistakably his. She stared at it for a long time before daring to open it. "Diep, by the time you read this, I'll be back in the city. I need to handle the company for a while, but I don't know how long I'll stay. Maybe I'm leaving to forget, or maybe I'm leaving to remember what brought me here in the first place. You once told me that love was dangerous. Maybe you were right. But living without it feels far worse. So I'll keep building, keep fighting, and if fate is kind, I'll find my way back to you. Until then, be kind to yourself. James." The letter trembled in her hands as she read. Something in her chest broke, but not in the way it had before. This time, it wasn't despair, it was realization. "Lynn," she whispered, "I pushed him away because I thought I was saving him. But maybe I was just afraid to be saved." Lynn smiled, tears in her eyes. "Then stop being afraid." That night, Diep sat by the window staring at the horizon. The moon hung low, its reflection shimmering across the water. For the first time in weeks, she felt something shift inside her, a small flicker of courage. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing: she couldn't keep living like a ghost in her own life. The next morning, before the sun rose, she packed a small bag, a few clothes, the letter, a papaya, perfectly ripe. She locked her door and walked toward the bus station. The air was cool and sharp, filled with the smell of the sea. Every step felt heavy, yet her heart grew lighter with each one. Hours later, she arrived in the city. The noise, the dust, the chaos, all of it pressed against her, overwhelming and alive. She hadn't been here in years. The buildings seemed taller, the people faster. But somewhere among them she knew was him. She asked around, finally finding the address of his company. When she arrived, the receptionist blinked in surprise at the sight of a woman in worn sandals and a sun-faded dress. "Do you have an appointment?" Diep shook her head. "No, but please tell Mr. James that Diep is here." The receptionist hesitated, then nodded. "Wait here." Minutes passed. Then, from behind the glass doors, she saw him. He was dressed in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, eyes tired yet bright. When he saw her, he froze. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The world around them seemed to fall away, the phones, the noise, the city itself. Finally, he stepped forward. "Diep," he breathed. She smiled, tears glistening. "You look busy." He laughed softly, still disbelieving. "You came." "I did." "Why?" She took a deep breath. "Because running away was easier than loving you, and I'm tired of easy things." For a heartbeat, silence. Then James closed the distance between them. "I thought I lost you." "You didn't," she said, her voice trembling. I just needed time to find myself first. He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. They walked out of the building together into the chaos of the city. People stared, but Diep didn't care. For the first time, she didn't shrink from the world's gaze. That evening, they sat at a small cafe near the river. The air was warm, filled with the hum of traffic and the soft strumming of a guitar from somewhere nearby. Diep told him about her days, about Lynn, about the garden. James listened like a man who had been starving for her voice. When the waiter brought tea, Diep smiled shyly. I brought you something. She pulled the papaya from her bag, its skin glowing orange in the dim light. James laughed, startled. You brought me fruit? It's the sweetest one I've grown, she said softly. I thought you should have it. He looked at her, his eyes softening. Then it's perfect. They sat there long after the tea went cold, talking about everything and nothing. It felt simple, natural, like the world had finally stopped fighting them. As the sun dipped low, James took her hand. You once told me you weren't worthy of love, he said quietly. Do you still believe that? Diep shook her head. No, because love isn't about worth. It's about choice. And I choose this. I choose you. He smiled, the kind of smile that could light a room. Then we'll start from here. The sound of the city faded, replaced by the quiet rhythm of their breathing. For the first time, Diep felt no fear, only peace. Weeks later, they returned to her small home by the coast. The garden was overgrown, but alive. The papaya trees had bent under the weight of their fruit. Diep walked among them, her fingers brushing the leaves. They kept growing, she said softly. James smiled. So did you. They spent the afternoon cleaning, laughing, cooking together. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real. When night came, they sat by the fire, Hockey asleep at their feet. The waves outside whispered like old friends, and Diep leaned her head against his shoulder. I used to think love was something that made you weak, she murmured, but it's not. It's what makes you brave enough to stay. James turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then let's stay. And in that quiet moment, beneath the sound of the sea and the flicker of the firelight, they did.